Calling from a 917 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
Yes, it is you.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, hey. I was wondering, you guys are just talking about this topic. I caught the last part of the Supreme Court discussion, but did you discuss the Katie Halper piece on Sydney Embers and the New York Times?
No.
We should at some point. It's a really good piece.
Yeah, they just reran it in Jacobin, but it was in fair.org originally.
Yeah, no, I read the piece.
You read it? Yeah. So to me, it's a very well supported critique of conflicts of interest with Sydney Embers, whose father-in-law is the CEO of Bain Capital,
right?
And she was a former reporter for the coal industry, and somehow just went to the top of the New York Times, campaign reporters, and she's assigned to Bernie. And I first heard about it when Diane Ravitch wrote about her critique of Bernie's charter school policy. But it turns out that she's repeatedly citing sources without disclosing that they're paid lobbyists and think tank guys, and she's putting down that they're Democratic strategists and whatnot. They were called on this. I wrote a letter to the Times saying, can we have an ombudsman review? But Sydney Ember just came out with another piece covering Bernie Sanders. So
well, of course.
Listen,
this is to be expected. The New York Times, the last thing in the world they want is Bernie Sanders to be president of the United States. And it's not just the New York Times. I would say the vast majority of media outlets are owned by very wealthy people who someone like Bernie Sanders strikes them as a threat, and they wouldn't have to put a Sydney Embers on the beat if they thought there was actually a legitimate critiques to be made of Sanders. I mean, look, you see this, the funny thing is I have seen people, writers, academics, get up in arms with who the New York Times will choose for a book review. Okay? It's how can they have this person choose this book review when that person doesn't know anything about that academic field, or that person has a bone to pick with this other person or something like that. And people will be incensed by it. But when it comes to political coverage, they'll take this cub reporter who has no experience, as far as I can tell, she
was an analyst for BlackRock,
in extensive political coverage. And they will basically say, you have the proper disposition to critique Bernie Sanders. But it is not a valid critique because it is coming from the very mindset and pedigree that Bernie Sanders is the greatest threat to. And I will say that also represents a very small portion of the electorate.
It's also a reflection of the cultural corollary of all of this decades of inequality and accumulated power, because we know, everything you said is true, and we also know that, and this would never happen, obviously, because of these same power dynamics, but if the Times appointed somebody who was previously a labor union organizer and then a staff writer for Jacobin, and then they got hired as a political reporter for the New York Times, and then they were assigned to cover Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, that would be not a national, but it would be a regular meltdown. How can you hire this person? They're not credible. They're left-wing. They have a bias. They have this background. There's still this notion that if somebody has a business background, that's non-ideological,
right,
non-biased.
Right.
In fact, going back to the previous disingenuous argument.
Appreciate the call.
I think
Thanks.
this is really just a left-wing smear job on the Ember family, including Sydney's father, screenwriter Matt Ember, who wrote movies such as the Get Smart remake and Get Smart, Bruce and Lloyd with Bruce Lee and Will Ferrell. and Home and Failure to Launch with Matthew McConaughey.
It's because we
I'll
can't.
say failure to launch.
We can't tolerate seeing the meritocracy work.
and
They are the
go.
worst people.
and
They
his
can't even-
book 101 Reasons Not to Be a Liberal.
Oh my
Really?
God!
Yeah.
Of course.
Mm.